Welcome back to another episode of the Workplace Wanderer. This is the fourth episode of this LinkedIn Live series, and I'm having so much fun doing this. This is also now, as of last week, become a podcast as well. So for anybody listening on any of your favorite podcast platforms, you may hear us reference LinkedIn Live a few times. The audio is being recorded on a LinkedIn Live originally and then being transferred over, being repurposed essentially for a podcast. So I hope you enjoy the show. I am so excited about today's guest and today's topic. And I'm excited mostly because there's been such a big buildup for you and I to be chatting. It's been a while of us sort of canceling on each other, and mostly me canceling on you for crazy reasons. And so I appreciate you coming on the show and still being willing to entertain speaking to me. So today's guest is Priscilla Torres, and today's topic is navigating generational differences at work. So Priscilla, thank you for coming on, and I would love if you could just introduce yourself and a little bit of your background, your current jobs. I know you have a few things you're doing and what's going on in your life.
I appreciate that. And it is such an honor to be here today. So thank you, Blake, for the invitation. So my name is Priscilla Torres, and I have the honor of serving as the Chief Human Resources Officer for Health Choice Network. I've been with this incredible organization for the last 11 years. And in addition to my full-time role as CHRO, I am also an adjunct professor and have been teaching for the last 7 years with Broward College. And I've also held multiple board positions. And most recently, I was appointed as the president for a local chapter SHRM board called HRABC, or HR Association of Broward County. And through that forum, we're able to get together and support and provide resources to all of the HR professionals across the Broward County area. So generational differences is definitely a topic that I love to talk about. So I look forward to the discussion. So thank you for having me.
Well, I imagine in your role, generational differences is something that you're constantly trying to navigate. I mean, you're dealing with all of the employees and trying to build a culture and an environment that's inclusive for everybody. And obviously racial differences and religious backgrounds and different backgrounds where people come from, I imagine is very difficult to navigate and be inclusive in that sense.
Sure.
But also the generational piece, it shifts so much of how we communicate with each other, how we learn, what our motivations are at work. So I'm pumped to get into this topic. I do have some questions for you though, first. So one thing I decided that I wanted to do is we have these things called the next level cards of progress. And what they are, it's a deck of cards of 32 different questions. I've been shuffling them as you've been introducing yourself, and I'm going to pick up. You'll answer the question. I'll answer the same question.
Okay.
We will kind of break the ice and start off there.
I love it.
Sometimes it's a little bit personal. Divulge as much as you like. You don't have to go too deep if you don't want.
Sounds like a plan.
I'm an open book though, and if you share, I'll share.
Okay.
All right. Oh, this is a good one. This is a tough one to be put on the spot with.
Okay.
If you could choose one song to be your entrance theme music, what would it be and why?
I would say Welcome to the Jungle by Guns N' Roses. Why? One, because I love classical rock and I grew up with classical rock music. So that's just one of my favorite songs. But I also think it's just exciting. It's energetic. It just really resonates with my personality. And life is just, not that it's a jungle, but life is just so different. There's so many experiences and so much uniqueness to each day. So I think I welcome each and every day to bring its own challenges. So I think that would be my best choice. Wasn't too difficult.
No, I'm shocked. You had an answer immediately. That's awesome. I have to go through my song knowledge, and I'm gonna admit one that's kind of embarrassing here, but my closest friends will laugh because they know me so well. I'm going boy band here.
Oh, nice.
I'm going Backstreet's Back by Backstreet Boys. And
Oh.
here's why, is I feel like there's such a good buildup in the song. And I feel like, to me, the way I've interpreted the song is about reinvention, where you have a certain level of accomplishment. You kind of sit in that success for a little while, and you sort of reinvent yourself or come out with something new and kind of move in a different direction. And, you're back and you're ready to just kind of hit the ground running. So maybe I'm overthinking the Backstreet Boys. I doubt they wrote the song, but I like the idea of that. I feel like I've lived my life in that sense, where I've lived in a similar vein of mental health work for the last 10 years. But even prior to that, I was struggling with a substance use disorder and found recovery and sort of came back guns a-blazing and jumped right into this type of work and kept going back to school, then went for the leadership piece and started shifting towards more workplace wellness and leadership, still within the mental health vein, and now going back to school again. And it's just, to me, it feels like we're constantly working on a new chapter of our life. And it's exciting to get in the lab, write the chapter, and then release it to the world.
100%. That's what life is all about. Just learning and growing and making ourselves better. So congratulations on that. But that was a good choice. I am pro NSYNC, but Backstreet Boys has a good song. So
I don't discriminate. I like both boy bands equally. It ends with me with that era. New Kids on the Block is a little bit too old for me. Talk about generational differences. It's just, it's a little bit too like early 90s, 80s for me. So I'm more of the 90s. 2000s.
Same here.
So, well, that's awesome. Thank you for answering that question so quickly. So you've worked your way into this field. You're an adjunct professor. What are you a professor in? What are you teaching?
So I teach under the supervision and management bachelor's degree, but I speak on or teach on courses around organizational development, organizational effectiveness, organizational leadership, and all the behaviors that are entailed in that.
Within those topics, or that topic, it sort of all kind of falls under one umbrella, I'd imagine. What is the one, there's got to be one part of it that excites you the most, or you feel the most passionate about, one theory, one, when teaching this type of stuff. And of course, it's important to take in all theories and all the different aspects of an organization and consider and look at the thing as a whole in a way. But for you, is there a specific area within that topic, like a subtopic that particularly excites you?
I would probably say just learning about leadership styles, because I think, and this ties really well with generational differences, that we find in literature that at different points of time, some of the leadership styles are a little bit more dominant than others. So I think just creating a sense of awareness of these are the different types of leadership styles that are out there, and using the classroom setting, because there's very generational differences in at least the classrooms that I have an opportunity to teach in. So you have older generation that have been working for a long period of time, going back to school. You have those that are fresh out of high school, that are pursuing their bachelor's degree. So it creates such a beautiful forum, because it allows students to be able to share their own personal experiences, and some can apply their experiences into the work that we work on. But I think there's a lot of power in having just that diversity of group, because we're able to learn from each other. And specifically for the newer students, they're able to see, wow, there's a lot of differences in how we can lead. And these are the different leadership styles, and grabbing kind of pieces of the good experiences and thinking about all of the negative experiences that they may have had with prior leaders or people that they've interacted with, so that can help shape their own leadership style as they, kind of move on in the workforce. So I think there's a lot of research that still needs to be done in that area, but it's just an area that just absolutely fascinates me, and, can just stir some really, really great, fruitful discussions amongst the students.
That's great. And I think learning about that stuff, it's interesting. So we talk about stereotyping within the different generations, right? And
Mhm.
we'll get more into that. I think people generally stereotype leadership as well. So there's a
Mhm.
specific person or vision that comes to mind when you hear the word leader.
Mhm.
And I think one of the most refreshing things for me to learn as we dove into studying this topic
Mhm.
is all of the different leadership styles that exist, and
Sure.
learning that there is no one size approach to leadership, and that really what that means to me is that anybody is capable of being a leader. They just need to find which style works best for them. And the situation, of course, has to be correct. And there's a lot of factors that come into play. But it's inspiring to know that you can sort of mold your approach to leadership. Anybody
Mhm.
can do it and make it work. Your personality and what you bring to the table can
Mhm.
all be utilized by the different styles of leadership.
100%. Absolutely.
That's it's really cool, and I love that you're instilling that in people, especially in the bachelor's
Mhm.
level. At that age, they're learning from such a young age that they can.
Mhm.
There is a mold that fits to them,
Yeah.
and they can find it. They don't have to be the stereotypical leader.
Exactly. And I think there's a lot of power also in not being prescriptive, because I think in my experience in teaching, the younger generation is feels a little bit more pressured to fit into a category,
Mhm.
right? Or to pick a level of leadership that they want to foster. But what I've learned as a leader is that there's a lot of strength in being a little bit of different styles of leaders, of leadership, and it's creating your own mold, as you had said, and it's being your own authentic self. And as long as you're empathetic, you're caring, you want to motivate and empower your staff, and you're just grabbing again like the positivity across various different leadership styles, and eliminating the leadership styles that don't necessarily fit with that individual, with that within the organization or the environment that they work in. I
Mm.
think that's where leaders can really flourish, because they are being their authentic self. They're not being prescriptive and trying to fit into a category. So that, we kind of have discussions around that with the students, just to understand that you don't have to marry yourself to an idea or a theory or a specific leadership style. There's fluid and flexibility on allowing them to be their best selves.
Yeah, I mean, the way that you just put that is it's perfect, and it really is such a fascinating topic
Mhm.
and idea that and I love that you've emphasized the authentic self piece and how important that is
Mhm.
for a leader. And I can speak from personal experience of thinking that I had to fake a certain way of speaking, fake a certain way of behaving in order to be categorized as a leader.
Mhm.
It took a long time for me to recognize that that works against me,
Mhm.
that being my authentic self is the best way to inspire others and to motivate others and to connect with others. I think is the most important piece with authenticity, is that it helps us connect on a
Mhm.
deep level. So yeah, no, thank you, and I appreciate the work you're doing. That's amazing. Also with HRABC, I've actually done some presentations for their conference down here in the
Oh,
past.
wonderful.
Yeah, it's
Well, we
fun.
welcome you. We're currently planning for our October annual conference, so we'd love to have you there.
Cool. Love to come. There's one that I think I submitted maybe for last year, and I can submit again, was about leading with kindness. And
Mm.
that to me was the greatest thing I ever learned about leadership and the change in leadership styles that's occurred over the years.
Mhm.
And this will sort of, we'll move into the generational differences here, because I know 20, 30 years ago, if you talked about kindness as a leader,
Mhm.
it was correlated with weakness.
Mhm.
And that was unheard of, and you'd be laughed out of a room.
Sure.
At this point, though, to find that I feel that in my core, I'm a kind person and that I want to be kind,
Mhm.
and being nice to somebody is kind of comes what's most naturally to me, and being mean or harsh or
Mhm.
yelling at somebody just doesn't come naturally to me at all.
Yeah.
So finding out that we're moving in that direction and that kindness is such an asset as a leader at this point, and compassion, empathy was so refreshing to me that it's basically ended up being most of my focus for my master's.
I love that.
Yeah. So it'll continue to be my focus through the doctorate program.
We need more kindness in the world. And I think a personal, I'm just going to add one additional point is that I've learned, at least in the last 4 years of my life, that grace is such an important factor to identify for ourselves, but also for others, just like learning to give each other grace and learning that, to give ourselves grace for failures or for mistakes in our day-to-day work, and being able to extend that and being authentic to ourselves and showing our teams that, hey, I'm going to give myself grace and we're going to accept that we are not all perfect. And I'm going to give you and extend that same grace and be empathetic, because life is hard and we all are battling and have our own personal challenges. So it's so important as leaders to be able to just extend that grace to one another so that we can really help empower each other and help everyone, our teams, and help each other be not only our best selves, but to balance when we can't be like on point and, be at 100%, because realistically, I think we set ourselves up for failure if we have those unrealistic expectations of ourselves. So I love that you are so passionate about speaking about kindness, because as leaders, I think that's such an incredible topic that needs to be discussed and shared more, of how we can enhance our leadership styles to just extend that kindness and to do the work that we're doing, but to do it in a way where we show that we care for our staff and that we're engaged with our staff, and just love and be kind to one another. So I'm all about it. So congratulations. I think that's wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. So we'll jump into the topic here. I do want to say hi to Reb from Malta, who's saying hello. Sarah from our team says hi, Blake and Priscilla. And Sarah asked a question, and we can maybe just answer really quick.
Sure.
Do you think everyone can be a leader, or it takes a certain person to be one?
Oh, Sarah, that is a really good question. If you would have asked me this question maybe 7-10 years ago, I would have said that you're either born to be a leader or not. Now I think very differently. I feel like if anyone has the will, because it takes a lot to be a leader. It's a huge responsibility. And you see all these memes that show that leadership is a privilege. It really is, because we are responsible for others. And there's a huge responsibility that comes around that. As long as someone is open to learn, to adapt, to be current with the changes and wanting to lead effectively, and you have the right tools, you have the right resources, you invest in yourself to learn how to be an effective leader, I have no doubt in my mind that anyone can be in a leadership position. They just have to have that will and that drive and all the other things that I just talked about.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I think that also, in my opinion, there's leadership and being a leader is such a broad term, and there's where we have to lead just ourselves. You can be a leader within your own life and lead yourself out of a very dark situation, more positive one. For example, with substance use disorders, we know a lot of people who decided to make a change, put together new systems, and really pumped out difficult consistency and hard work every single day to make those changes in their life. So they led themselves, and in the process end up inspiring others. But I think also, I agree with you that anybody can be a leader. Anybody can learn to become a leader. I do think there's certain factors that play a role. You have to be willing to learn a lot, like you said. I think experience plays a really important role there as well. So the more experience you have, and I think behind every good leader is an amazing team as well. So it's as a leader, not thinking that you have to make every decision, do everything for yourself.
100%.
I think if you can have a team and learn how to rely on that team, actually makes you a better leader.
100%. There's a saying that says, show me your team and show me like who you are, and then show me your team, and that'll show if you're a true leader. Our jobs as leaders is truly to be able to develop and create new leaders, and fostering that environment is just so critical. And like you said, it's being positioned. And I've learned this lesson recently, and I was sharing this with a colleague of mine. We were talking about leadership because it's a topic we love to talk about. And I was sharing my own testimony that I've changed a lot as a leader. And I've learned that I used to have this perception that leadership meant that I had to, facilitate everything, and I had to own all the projects. And, I had to lead all these efforts in order to be seen as an effective leader. And what I've learned is the complete opposite. It's empowering your staff. And I've built my team where, I'm very collaborative, and I want to ask, like, what are your thoughts? How do you want to handle the situation? What do you think is the best approach? And allowing them to be able to share not only creates that sense of empowerment, that sense of confidence in building these individuals within their respective roles, but it also allows for a free flow of ideas across generations, across different people. And I've learned that the best format of leadership, in my opinion, is to just be open to allowing your teams and those that report to you to be able to flourish, to be able to lead initiatives, to make decisions. And then you allow and kind of set the parameters of the direction, but you're there to support and act as a resource and allow them to truly flourish in their roles. So wanted to just add that, because I think that's a really important aspect to just leadership in general. And again, everyone's experiences are different, but I've recently, been aware of just kind of my growth in that area of leadership, and have learned that, that's what works best for me.
So well said. So well said. So yeah, thank you for that answer. And the last comment here is from Ryan. And he says, I wish more organizations shared more about formal and informal leaders, provide all employees with leader training, knowing the differences between leadership development and leader development. And I think that's a good point too. I think a lot of employees don't recognize that just because you're not in a formal leadership position doesn't mean that you can't be a leader or a catalyst to change within your organization. I actually made a post about that yesterday. So let's move to generational differences. I mean, this is a topic that I'm fascinated by. I shared a recent experience I had with you, or a recent experience I had, and I shared the experience with you, not with you. You get what I'm saying? Where there was some kind of generational stereotyping going on. And so I'm curious, in a more broad sense, what are some of the more common issues that an organization may face when it comes to generational differences?
So that's a really broad question. But if I had to narrow it down, I'd say the establishment of teams, or how teams collaborate with one another. Number 2 would be communication. So different communication preferences, and we can speak a little bit more about that. 3 would be benefit or like incentive opportunities that are being provided by the employers. 4, I'd say, is expectations. So I would probably categorize it in those 4, and I'd be happy to kind of, talk a little bit more about each one. But I think the most important, because they're all important, but the most important today would be cross collaboration. Because in my opinion, we are putting generations into boxes. And I think more recently, with the rise of technology and just the way that we work, and there's a lot of stereotypical names that are used for different generations. And let's just be real, millennial, I'm a millennial. millennials, Gen Zs, we are the majority of the workforce today, as the baby boomers are either getting ready for retirement or are in the retirement phase. The Gen X's, are kind of following suit. So we're trying to find this balance of, how do we work across four predominant, generations and being able to manage that multi-generational workforce. So I think with cross collaboration, it's critical that HR leaders or organizations are really keeping a pulse of how their culture is set up to be able to collaborate across each of the generations and eliminating the stereotype words or terminology. And I think we really need to be more intentional about changing the narrative for generational differences and just eliminating that from our vocabulary. We're all different people, come from different experiences, different backgrounds. We all contribute and can add value to the organization and to the work that we do. So it's how do we position ourselves where we're just changing that narrative for our organizational cultures and fostering an environment that's inclusive of building teams that have all generations and, being aware of how are we communicating. And communication is a huge topic, right? Like we talk about effective communication. It's not the words that we're using. It's, not only the tone that we're speaking on, but it's really the format of communication and making sure that if we want to send specific messages that we're aware that everyone perceives and receives information differently. A baby boomer will prefer that face-to-face contact, will prefer picking up the phone and calling someone regarding something versus a millennial like myself. Text me. If you want to get a hold of me, text me. Because we just all we grew up differently with different forms of technology or different ways that we did business or continue to do business. So it's how, as an organization, do we find different ways that we can communicate with our staff through different forums, newsletters, emails, memos, printouts, posters. I mean, think about all forms of communication to make sure that we are being kind of inclusive of everyone, but we all learn differently. We all communicate differently. So it's just being a little bit more aware of how we can just break down some of those barriers that we may be fostering within our own organizations that we don't even realize. And then when we say, oh, we're having a communication issue, well, let's look at why are some of those? Yeah, it could be. So anyways, I could go down on.
No. It's super interesting. Maybe just for purposes of anybody's listening or watching, can you just quickly break down the different generations?
Sure. So at least predominantly right now in the workforce, we've had the traditionalist, which have already majority retired. So I think that ends in like the 1944, 1945. Okay. So those individuals are primarily out of the workforce, but some may still be in the workforce. Then we have baby boomers, which are, let's say, from 1946 to the 1960s. And the baby boomers are in that phase where they're getting ready for retirement, talking about retirement, or maybe some have already retired in that generation. Then we have the Generation X, which is from mid-1960s to the early 80s. So the Gen X's are now we're exposed to the beginning forms of technology, computers, cell phones, things of that sort. So I find the Gen X's so fascinating because they have certain practical practices or theories that they learn from the baby boomers, and then leverage that with being a little bit more adaptive to technology. Sure. And then you have the millennials or the Gen Ys, like myself, who are 80s to early 2000. And then, with our generation, we grew up with MySpace, Facebook. Technology was the backbone to how we started to learn and how we were able to communicate with one another and be able to really learn how we can get responses quicker, right? And we want that kind of sense of, quick responses, quick validation for feedback, open to feedback, things of that sort. And then the newest generation that's in the workforce are the Gen Zs. So that's mid to late 90s to about 2012. And with the Gen Zs, we have a generation that's fully immersed into technology, is very environmental friendly or aware of environmental awareness, being able to give back, creating boundaries of work-life balance, and wanting to value that time. So it's just, you see the differences in across all the different generations, and it all has to do with what our environments were at the time of when we were being brought up and coming into the workforce with different resources that maybe some of the other generations didn't have that exposure or opportunity to have in the past.
Right. I mean, I think our technology has just grown exponentially so quickly. I mean, far surpasses the evolution of the human mind. So it really just depends on when you were born and how fast it was adapting at that point. Because every year we went on, it just going faster, faster, faster. Maybe I'm biased. I'm also a millennial. So maybe I'm biased. I do love our sort of like, we are in the middle of like, when we were born, we were playing outside, for the first few years. But then technology came out and we had to adapt. And although we still prefer a phone call here and there, we still like to text more. We like things done quickly, but not too quickly all the time. We still like to earn. So it's sort of a nice balance.
Sure.
It takes all. And I think, I mean, I can speak for myself. I'm a little bit less judgmental of the Gen Z population. But this sort of battle between the generations is not like it's anything new. I mean, you can go back to any period in time and they're always complaining about the generation before them. That's just how it's always been. I think now as we moved, and maybe you can speak more to this, this topic has become a very hot topic. And I'd imagine, is it because we're talking a lot more about diversity and inclusion in the workplace? Is that why this has become, it seems like it's really more of a forefront issue now, that people are trying to mold their organization to be applicable to all generations? Is it because we're talking about it more? Is it because people are demanding change more? Or is it because the differences are so much wider than they've ever been in history?
I think it's a combination of all. I don't have the right answer for that. But I think it's a combination of it all. I just feel that because we are more aware of the differences, and not that generations is discriminatory, and I'm not referencing that, but I'm saying that, it's another way that we're categorizing or putting people into boxes, like I was referencing in the beginning. So I think it's important for us, bless you. I think it's important for us to have those conversations. And as organizations, it's, asking for the voice of the employees and making sure that we are creating spaces, that we are understanding our people, that we're asking for employees' preferences in communication, preferences in the way that we're cross-collaborating across organizations, preferences in training. It's just asking those questions so that not necessarily it's a generational issue, but it's more of an making sure that we're being inclusive of all, and that we're providing, these opportunities for our staff to be able to share what their preferences are, what their career path, what does that look like for them, and how can we support them in that? So I think it's more of just, let's change the narrative to not make it more generational focused, but we still have to talk about it. We have to figure out how we can just continue to develop our own workforce and empower the staff that we have.
In some presentations I've given in the past, and I'll be transparent with you here too, is that I understand the generational differences. What makes my head like spin off its axis is how to actually apply and mold an organization. Even implementing what you've been talking about makes my head spin, of like how you're basically having to shift even policies and communication techniques and all types of stuff depending on who you're speaking to, which is it's important, and I totally understand that. It's as an organization grows larger and larger, I love to hear how that works. But what I'll say is that when I've given presentations, I've sort of educated on the generations and then the generational differences, and I leave it there. All I'm trying to do from my perspective, since I'm not an expert on implementing, is just create a certain level of understanding of each other,
Sure.
so that we can understand what motivates each other and why. Yes, we all may be different, but we're all trying to work towards one common goal together. So let's find a way to make this work. And I kind of leave it there.
Sure.
Whenever that slide goes up on my PowerPoint, though, that is always by far the slide where the most phones come out to take a picture of. I mean, everybody sort of is interested, and it seems to be one of the most difficult topics to navigate, especially people in your role, like HR, trying to figure out how do we do this. And the word that keeps coming to mind is what you said earlier, is that grace, is having the grace and the patience to say, okay, I'm talking to Bob. Bob is 60. He's not going to text me back, or he's going to text me back a one-word answer. It doesn't mean he's mad at me. He got the message. It's all good. Or maybe I should just call him and explain further. An email is not going to suffice here. And just that, giving each other that grace, and vice versa. Bob has to give it back to me as well. Do you feel that this is one of the most difficult topics to manage in a workplace in certain terms of diversity and inclusion?
I probably say it is, only because there's no blueprint on what works for one organization may vary than what works for another. So I think as HR professionals, when we attend conferences or speak to experts in this area, I don't necessarily know that there's the right answer. I think each organization really needs to look at their own workforce, ask the questions, be open to receiving that feedback and hearing, what are some of those preference differences and what they would like to experience or see differently from the organization, and being open enough to have the discussions and to be able to adapt to those new practices, policy changes, and everything that may come as a result of that. But starting with the discussion, I think, is really important. But it's understanding and knowing that there's no one size fits all. And it's just being open to that change, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think the developing the understanding, and I think it goes beyond also the leadership in HR. It's sort of helping educate the employees as well. Sometimes sort of, acknowledging the elephant in the room and educating on it is the first step towards bringing people together. You're creating a level of understanding of each other. That automatically almost inserts a level of grace into the organization. But then obviously the systems itself has to adapt to the generational differences as well, or just the understanding of how people learn, work, and all that stuff as well.
Yeah, I think, but one of the things you mentioned a little while ago is really important, and it's just awareness. And creating that awareness is really, really important, especially for the newer generation, because when they're coming into their workforce, they don't have the experiences that other generations may have or that other individuals may have. So they're coming into the workforce and they're like, whoa, this is very different than what I'm thinking, and what I feel my values are maybe a little bit different than what the organization that they're working in. So it's figuring a way where, how can we create a sense of awareness for across all on how do we best understand each other? How do we best, work together to a common goal, like you had mentioned? And it's just having that awareness is really, really important. And you'd be surprised how most times we're not even having these discussions. And that I think hurts the organizational cultures, and may hurt retention. And companies may say, well, why do we have such high turnover? Why do we, have all these things that are maybe going against what they're trying to reach or accomplish. And sometimes, looking at personal values that may not align with the staff that they're hiring. So it's, I think, creating a sense of awareness, and I'm going down a whole nother path, but just having that sense of awareness and being able to talk about it and teach everyone that we're all different, and, how can we all work collaboratively and together, in the most effective manner, I think is really important. And setting those expectations also, I think, is really important.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that too. So setting expectations, educating. What I'm hearing you say is almost more of a strength-based model. So like everybody does have a value and bring something to the table.
Mm-hmm.
How can we collaborate and create systems at work and groups at work that can work with each other using everybody's strengths?
100%.
Understanding that they can all rely on each other for different things and different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned earlier incentives and incentivizing, across the different generations. It sounds like there's different incentives and purposes and like motivations essentially for working. Could you talk a little bit to that, of maybe like in a broad stroke? I know it's it does vary, but in a broad stroke is how does motivation change from generation to generation?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. And obviously there's a lot of other variables that impact that, right? Like industry and the structures, how performance is evaluated and things of that sort. But I think it's really important for us to understand as organizations and employers that as the newer generations are predominantly taking over in our organizations, sometimes it's worth looking into our benefit offerings and how we are compensating our staff, how we are incentivizing our staff through bonus structures, or commissions, depending on the industry, and being able to be open and adapt to the new workforce. Some organizations that I've interacted with or speak to have had the same offerings for years. And I challenge and I say, hey, maybe it's time to just take a look at it, or maybe just ask staff, what is it that they're looking for? What would mean more to them? Because historically, having 401k plans or maybe retirement or pension plans was really important for the baby boomers. For the Gen Zs, they want to pay off their student loans. they want to, be able to have Netflix, Hulu subscriptions, and look at different types of benefit offerings that relay more to their values and to what they're looking for. So I think there's just a lot of value in just having the discussions and asking staff. We do that really well at Health Choice Network. We just have an incredible culture, incredible leaders. And one of the things that we enjoy doing every year is to ask our staff for feedback. And through that feedback is we ask questions around benefit offerings, just to make sure that, we are offering the type of benefits that, or different programs that pertain to or are important to our employees. So it's just being able to have the discussion, being open, understanding what our staff is looking for, and then comparing it to, to see if that is something that the organization can offer in the future or can offer in that moment. There's so many partners, so many resources, so many organizations that will partner with organizations to help with these discussions. Yeah. But as long as we're just continuing to have those discussions and being aware of what the times and the offerings that are important to each of our employees, then we're able to adapt appropriately and give our staff some really valuable offerings that impact them in their personal and professional lives.
That's interesting. It's almost like a democracy, essentially. It's everybody has a voice and
Mhm.
can kind of help contribute to the change and the shifts in the policies and what type of incentives exist. I love
Mhm.
it. That's really how it should be. I guess what I've seen too is I think the younger the generation gets, the more they value time,
Mhm.
more they value
Flexibility.
flexibility,
Mhm.
balance, and it's almost more mission driven
Mhm.
opposed to growth driven, I guess I would call it. It used to be before I'm going to work, I'm going to put in my 5 years because I'm trying to go for the next role and go for the
Mhm.
next higher role and kind of work my way up the ranks. And now it's more of like, what are we working for?
Mhm.
What are we contributing toward? What type of change are we trying to make?
Mhm.
And at the same time, balancing that all with life and having a sense of life.
Mhm.
I think the pandemic, and maybe this will be the last kind of question I'll ask you here, but you know, how has the pandemic shifted motivations in the different generations? Or have you seen a shift since the pandemic and what people want from their
Mhm.
workplace and the expectations around it?
I would say 100% it's changed. I feel that some organizations have adapted well. Others still are a little bit more conservative and are demanding like the similar work arrangements or work styles that were happening pre-COVID. But I think one of the things that COVID taught us is that we can be just as productive or even more productive working from home. And
Yeah.
that was a huge shift in mindset for most organizations. And of course, there's certain industries, certain, organizations that, will still have to have that face to face. But I think it's breaking down those barriers of, you can work no matter where you are located and be just as productive and be just as effective or if not more.
Yeah.
And depending on the person's own values, their own needs, and how they feel that they would be best efficient. So I'd say 100%, but it just varies in across,
Right.
organizations and positions and all of that stuff. I'll use Health Choice Network as an example.
Yeah.
We were in 2 states prior to COVID. Because of COVID and just really just expanding our openness to seeing, wow, there's really great talent all across the nation, and we want to be able to create the right programs to attract that, to retain um, external, team members that are outside of the state of Florida and the second state that we were in. And now we're across 27 states. So it's just been beautiful to see the growth that we've experienced, and just comes from that openness of seeing that there's really great talent in other parts of the state. And for most positions, so we don't have to be restrictive of keeping local talent or being in the office from, 8 to 5, because that doesn't really measure productivity, doesn't measure quality of work or performance. If we create other systems through performance management systems and key performance indicators and other mechanisms that we can integrate into our day to day, we can help change that narrative so that we're tracking productivity and performance in other mechanisms and not necessarily being on site each day. So I think COVID definitely helped with that.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, it's amazing what HCN is doing and how adaptable you guys are. I love it. It's just so cool. But I imagine also generational differences play a role in this as well. And there's certain generations, the older generations may want to have the ability to come work in the office and do their 9 to 5. And then
Sure.
there's the younger generations don't. Allowing for that flexibility.
Mhm.
I think it brought work styles. COVID kind of brought a lot of work styles to the forefront, and recognizing that people work and are more productive in different ways,
Sure.
and giving people that space to say, okay, well, what works for you? If you're going to be more productive, then it only makes sense for me to
Mhm.
allow you to be more productive and figure out how it works for you. So I do think it changed in that way. It's weird asking that question. This is going to sound like I'm a child and I don't really care. Um, I don't know that I've ever really reflected on like, holy shit. we lived through a pandemic. Like, like what we lived through, and I know, and maybe like on the surface level I have, but asking how it's shifted our cultures.
Yeah.
I mean, it really has shifted everything for us.
Mm-hmm.
To think that we've lived through a time, and I know I'm kind of late to the party and having this realization, but as
No, I haven't gotten to that realization either. I think it's because it's so normal. Like,
yeah,
it feels normal. So I'm sure that as time goes by and we reflect 30 years from now, we're gonna like it's really gonna hit us like, wow, we get to our great grandkids, or our grandkids. Your story, have we, survived and experienced a pandemic? But you're right. I'm
I
gonna
can,
do some reflection too.
yeah, I could just picture like an eighth grader or like a ninth grader in school reading in a textbook about the COVID-19 pandemic and being like, damn, that looks like that sucked.
Yeah.
But for us living through it, and what it does is give me a sense of like humanity for all the other pandemics and the stuff
Sure.
that we've read about, where
Yeah.
we're like, wow, that's awful. What
Sure.
people
Plague.
went through, but for them, it was just normal. Like they
Yeah.
were just going through it and adapting in the same way that we were.
Yeah.
So
That's
just
interesting.
sorry, I brought us on a tangent.
No, that was great. That was a good point.
Yeah, I don't know why my mind goes there. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on. You are so knowledgeable on this stuff, and it's so inspiring for me as somebody who is starting to dive further into my education in this. I'm starting to work and do more and more work with organizations.
Mhm.
You are someone I certainly look up to and have looked up to since we've met on LinkedIn and have been
Mhm.
trying to connect for months now. So I just appreciate your knowledge, what you just brought today within 45, 50 minutes. Just was so important. And I think the key takeaways for me was one, empathy of
Mhm.
trying to understand and put ourselves in other people's shoes across the generations and understanding why they are the way that they are
Mhm.
is so important. Developing a base of understanding and then working on a strength-based model
Mhm.
of not judging someone based on what they can't do, but finding out what they can do and what they're good at and helping to collaborate using those strengths. I mean,
Mhm.
working to collaborate to use those strengths within the workplace. And while it's up to the leaders to set the precedent and create systems that allow for that,
Mhm.
I think this again is a really important reminder that it's also up to all of us to be open-minded and to be empathetic and to be willing to take time to understand somebody else's living experience.
Well, very well said. Very well said. The only thing I can add to that is that as long as we, as working professionals, as leaders, or whatever role that we may play in a professional capacity, as long as we are open to having the discussions and we are open to adapting and changing to make our workforce stronger and making those that are around us stronger, then we're doing exactly what we need to do. And there's just so much value in having sessions like this. So thank you for inviting me. Thank you for creating these series to be able to just share best practices and to hear from different leaders, because we all have different experiences. We all have different contributions that we can add, and creating this forum is just so impactful to all those that are participating and just teaching others, and as I like to say, learning and growing together, because every day brings a new wealth of new experiences. So I appreciate all of the work that you're doing, and congratulations on your doctorate degree journey. That is an incredible journey that I'm finalizing myself too, as I'm hoping to walk the stage in the next few months. And it's just such a fruitful experience, and it will open your mind to all of these new practices that you can implement as a leader. So I'm here as a resource, anything I can do to help support you. But many congratulations. It's a very difficult but very rewarding journey that you're about to embark on. So that's exciting.
Yes, if life wasn't busy enough, right? We're
That's
both.
okay. We can handle it.
Yeah, no, it's going to be great. So thank you for saying all that, and thank you for coming on, and thank you for everybody who's listened. What's cool about the LinkedIn Live is that it will live on my page now, so it usually develops way more views throughout the day and the following days to come.
Nice.
But it's, like I said in the beginning, it is also being turned into a podcast. So Workplace Wanderer, you can find it on any Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, all of that stuff, Amazon, Alexa, all that good stuff. So just look up the Workplace Wanderer, and you can check out the podcast on there if you prefer to listen to this stuff while you drive. So
awesome.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and end this. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you, Blake. Bye, everyone. Bye.